Sometimes even good people can make a mistake. And when it happens, it's one of the most intense and emotional experiences of your life. It could be a DUI, or maybe you were in the wrong place with the wrong people at the wrong time. Or perhaps you just did something stupid at the spur of the moment without even thinking, and now you're in trouble with the law. Well, you need experienced legal help right away so you don't become a victim of the criminal justice system. Even good people can make a mistake, and if you, a friend, or a loved one has been accused of a crime, don't make another mistake by hiring the wrong attorney for the kind of help you need. You need to visit toddjohnslaw.com. That's toddjohnslaw.com, and then call Attorney Todd Johns today. Attorney Todd Johns has decades of experience helping good people like you who have made mistakes or bad decisions and will stand by you every step of the way. toddjohnslaw.com.
Is my co-host Sean Kane. Sean, how you doing today?
Billy Raids, doing great, buddy. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good. So today's guest, you got a little bit, I guess, from Steve Kopesky, who was our guest this week, that you need to talk about. So go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, we got so in depth, though. We kind of went off in this episode in all different avenues. You know, we focus a lot on Jimmy Hoffa, and we talked about so much. This was an important episode, but Steve kind of forgot about, what he wanted to say was the whole purpose of, what he was trying to say was basically that the OSS, the forerunner to CIA, and that kind of old boys network learned their tricks in tactics from union busting armies that were used by the robber barons like the Pinkertons, and that goes back to the Rockefellers, used the Pinkertons and stuff, and they busted the unions and stuff. So, Black Ops, the Phoenix program, Gladio, all these operations that we talk about, they all come from really what these guys learned smashing the unions.
Right.
And I think that's a great point. And I think this episode is so important because it gives you a different perspective on Jimmy Hoffa. And it gives you a totally different perspective on the Hoffa RFK feud, which really wasn't based on ideology. It was just based on two guys that were like pit bulls, two little, smaller stature guys that were just tough as nails.
Right.
Just got in the ring and start swinging.
Yeah.
And it led to this feud between the two of them. But the important thing is, a lot of the stuff that the CIA was doing, and we talk about, was Jimmy Hoffa kind of that asset? We know, that network, the CIA Intel network, uses people like Jay Lovestone, and we talked in that episode how they infiltrated the unions at the top level, the bottom level. I mean, they're all over the place, and we talk a lot about that and how the mob kind of was used because, big business was using thugs to break up the union organizations and strikes and rallies and stuff, and they were using that, so they had to fight their own, fire with fire. So
Right.
Hoffa went to the mob and just couldn't get him out. And we talked a lot about the disappearance, and it's just a fascinating episode, Billy.
Great episode. Yeah, really is. All right, Sean, we'll get right to it. Hope you enjoy it. Again, Steve Kopesky is our guest this week, and we thank you guys very much. We'll see you.
All right, enjoy it, buddy. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to announce to everybody that the That's Enough Out of You podcast is proud that we're going to sponsor the JFK Lancers November in Dallas conference. It's going to be November 21st through November 23rd at the Fairmont in Dallas, Texas. A lot of great speakers, researchers on the JFK assassination. And if you use our podcast promo, the That's Enough Out of You podcast promo code JFK10, you get 10% off the ticket. That's promo code JFK10. And you can find the tickets at the website assassinationconference.com. And a lot of great speakers. Paul Abbott is going to be there. A lot that we had on our show. Paul Abbott, Paul Blow, Johnny Kearns, Walter Herbst, Jeff Meek, Linda Giovanni Zambonini, who's coming up on our show. And a lot of other great researchers, and it's about the JFK assassination. So again, we're proud to promote this event. It's November 21st through November 23rd at the Fairmont in Dallas, Texas. The website is assassinationconference.com. And the That's Enough Out of You promo code is JFK10, and you get 10% off the ticket. So it's definitely going to be worth it. And I hope people are going to come out and enjoy the event. Unfortunately, Bill and I can't make it, but I know it's going to be a great event because the speakers are tremendous. So any other information that you want, you can message me and I could get that for you, or I could put you in contact with somebody who can answer the questions for you. Again, thank you, everybody.
All right. How's it going? How's everybody doing today?
How you doing, buddy?
Good. We are welcoming a first-time guest to That's Enough Out of You, Steve Kopesky, right? Is that how you say it?
Yeah, good job. Thank you.
Oh, all right. So how you doing, Steve?
I'm doing well. I'm excited.
Good. Well, it's good to have you.
Thank
So
you.
Steve, let's just give a quick bio of yourself, and then how you got into the researching on Jimmy Hoffa, and then we'll do a deep dive on Hoffa, buddy.
Yeah, sounds good. So, yeah, my name's Steve Kopesky. I'm at this point a long-time parapolitical researcher, independent, of course. I got into this pretty early when I was in high school, and then by my adult years, actually kind of coinciding with COVID, is when I started mixing more like on social media and podcasts and yeah, networking with people. I was really lucky. I was able to start friendships with some pretty serious researchers who put me in the right direction. Jimmy Hoffa just kind of ended up sticking out to me for a lot of reasons. Number one, I do have a background in labor organizing myself. Up until recently, I was on track to be a member organizer in my union up at work. And also, there is just like that parapolitical angle to Hoffa's life, which was, my other lifelong interest. So it was just kind of like a common sense thing. And especially when the movie The Irishman came out, I remember, I watched that just like all of us
Yeah.
and thinking like, oh yeah, I know all of this. And, oh, I don't think this is really correct, or, this part is kind of correct, but not really. And then, yeah, just kind of snowballed from there. That was about 6 years ago. I was planning on trying to put this into a book, and then I was thinking about maybe making a documentary for YouTube or something. But now I just started up a Substack, which I was hoping to get at least something published up there before I started this, so I could shamefully promote it to your audience. But I couldn't get my act together enough by today's date. So
That's all right, buddy.
Okay. Hey, Steve, where are you located?
I live in St. Louis, Missouri.
Oh, okay.
So let's get into it, Steve. Let's talk about Jimmy Hoffa. We could, I discussed the bullet points I want to go over, but you take it from here, my friend. Let's
Okay.
start on Jimmy Hoffa.
Yeah, so feel free to jump in whenever. I sometimes have a tendency to trail off into other rabbit holes, but
Yeah,
yeah, everybody knows.
yeah.
Yeah, well, it's very easy with this one. Yeah, Hoffa, General President of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters from 1957 to 1971. I mean, most people know him as a pretty kind of like the prototype for the corrupt union boss. And not to say that he wasn't. Um, one idea that I've been kind of trying to flesh out, it gets a little more broadly political. Um, it always kind of struck me as very interesting, his death, or technically his disappearance, but it's his death in 1975 happens at a really interesting time in America when basically the New Deal is basically dying and it's about to die. And the neoliberal revolution is pretty much just on the horizon. Everybody kind of likes to credit or blame Ronald Reagan for that, but a lot of that stuff actually starts in 1975. A lot of people don't realize this, but when Carter gets elected in 76, I mean, he actually takes a pretty conservative approach to the stagflation and all of this. And I'm not saying that anybody planned this, but I do think it's just kind of metaphysically interesting that right as these new neoliberal reforms are taking place, somebody might have thought, all right, I don't know if a pretty tough, outspoken, aggressive leader of the largest labor union in the country. We just can't have a guy like that around anymore. If Is that making sense? I don't know.
It does. It does make sense.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know. I'm not saying he was killed for that type of overt political reasons, but maybe that's the thing that kind of still maintains fascination for me is I can't think of another guy right now that I would compare to Jimmy Hoffa.
Oh, that's a good point. There really isn't.
No, I can't. The current Teamsters president, Sean O'Brien. I'm not a Teamster, so I hesitate to say, but he just strikes me like he's like just right out of central casting. He's kind of got this like Irish Boston tough guy persona, which I guess that translates better in 2025 America. But actually, for the last year, my perspective on Hoffa really kind of changed. For the first 4 or 5 years, it was just generally collecting documentation, putting together the biographical sketch. But it was really only the last year when I actually started to look at it from an explicitly labor perspective and a labor versus capital perspective. Because at the end of the day, and I think this point gets lost on a lot of people, especially in circles like ours with the assassinations of President Kennedy, and we do forget that he was a labor leader, and the Teamsters was the biggest labor union in the country, and he was getting better and better contracts. And to be completely honest, I'm to the point now, just in my documentation, that the shadow of McCarthyism actually casts its shadow over Hoffa's story for reasons we'll flesh out more. Honestly, more than say, you know, anti-Castro exiles trying to whack Castro. I
Yeah,
think
sure.
red baiting is actually much more in the background of this saga than anything else.
Let me ask you this, Steve.
Yes.
We know Jimmy Hoffa later would get involved with organized crime, but when you
Yeah.
look at, what happened, you look at the way you talk about capitalism, you talk about the way the big corporations were dealing with the labor movement at the time. I mean, they were hiring their own thugs to go in and break up. So Jimmy Hoffa, really, when you look at it, he had to fight fire with fire. So when he goes to organized crime, at some point, does he even have a choice? Like he has to. I mean, the way they're hiring thugs, and I mean, it was bad.
You know what? I'm glad you brought that up because that here, I'll start with this real early. So, I mean, he gets into the labor movement very organically. He gets a job at the Kroger warehouse during the Depression. I mean, working conditions back then were pretty rough, as you can
Yeah,
imagine. And
sure.
it's completely organically. Him and some friends at the warehouse, they use a large crate of fresh fruit as leverage to get the negotiations started. And so, yeah, it's completely organic. Now, at the time, and like what you were alluding to, so he's from Detroit. So this all his story starts in Detroit. Organized crime was explicitly on the side of the employers at that time. Actually, the top rackets guy in Detroit at the time, Santo Peroni, uh, more than anything else, more than bootlegging or narcotics or prostitution, he was like the union buster. You know, so through Hoffa's rise through the Teamsters hierarchy, it's actually not until a citywide Detroit strike in 1937 that he realizes that, well, let me say how I say this. He convinces the gangster element in Detroit to stay neutral. So that's actually his first, that's his first interaction with the real gangster elements is to stay out of the citywide strike. So just leave everybody alone. And like you said, and further down the road, I mean, yeah, it's kind of about survival. And he said in speeches, there's plenty of documentation I can provide that, I mean, he says the quiet part out loud. I mean, he even says something to the extent of like, I find it funny that, it's okay for the politicians and the employers to be in bed with gangsters, but when I want to get into bed with the gangsters, then I get, 30 grand jury sentences.
Go ahead, Steve. I didn't mean to cut you
Uh,
off.
Yeah, no, I mean, so that's really it. And I mean, I know we're going to touch a little bit on the Gladio. Well, here, let me here, throw me a, solid question real quick though, just so I don't go off into
Well, you know what? Do you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about the Nashville Trials, or do you want to leave that for a little bit?
Well, here, yeah, here. Let me actually. This will segue better from what we were just here. Let me start with the Killed Hoffa committee, actually, if you don't mind.
Okay, yeah,
Uh, because a lot of from what I've come to interpret is, well, we could just take the term racketeer. All right. I mean, it is not incorrect that that kind of starts from prohibition, from people talking about bootleggers, but it's in the 1920s that actually, in particularly, there's a pro-business group, the Chicago Employers Agency, in the 1920s, where they start to tell sympathetic journalists that they start conflating racketeer to be a union, like union leaders and labor unions, with bootleggers.
right.
So right off the bat, and also right off the bat, the Teamsters specifically, they also kind of already have a target on their back because they were one of the few unions that were organizing, black people, I'll just say. They were one of the few unions actually doing that. I don't want to give them too much credit to say that that was for any kind of a progressive reason. It was mostly just because those were the people that were taking these coal hauling jobs and milk delivery jobs and things like that. So the Teamsters already had, and they were also, and I'm still trying to figure out how they managed to do this, but even before Hoffa, the Teamsters actually were one of the few unions to organize the Jim Crow South. So you have the pro-business element starting in the 20s, conflating labor unions with bootleggers and racketeers, basically using racketeer to describe kind of all of them. There's large fallouts from the Arnold Rothstein scandals. I'm sure we all know
Yeah,
about this.
we know that, Steve.
Yeah, of course, of course. So it's all snowballing by the 1940s when conservative ideologues, they're really starting to and I'm skipping over a few things here, but they're looking at things like Arnold Rothstein. They're looking at things like Tammany Hall. They're looking at things like labor unions. They're looking at things uh, from like a very they're, they're just kind of conflating all these things together, and they're really trying to just, and we see the same rhetoric now with like, big city Democrats and Democrat-run cities. It's basically they're doing like the 1940s version of that, basically. So they get the idea to start looking into organized crime proper. Now, Kefauver, I mean, he was eyeing his run for president in, I guess, 52, was it? Yeah,
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah.
Yeah, and the people that are actually pushing him along, I mean, yeah, they're all just like these hardline conservative types. And they're both Republicans and Democrats. We all know Republicans or Democrats are different now. I mean, back then, I think both parties had their conservative and liberal wings.
Sure, we just talked about that.
Yeah,
We're talking about Lyndon Johnson. I mean,
yeah,
totally different than Kennedy. They were total
yeah,
opposite. So
yeah,
yeah, the party was
exactly.
split.
Actually, I think, the birthplace of progressivism in America was from a progressive political family, the La Follette family in Wisconsin, who were all Republicans, but yeah, that seems crazy to think now. But anyway, so the Kefauver Committee actually gets off to kind of a not quite a compromise start, but an interesting start. Because the two people they have to clear it with, Nevada Senator Pat McCarran and then President Truman. Uh, Pat McCarran, like I said, Nevada senator, he's actually the basis for the Crooked Senator and The Godfather Part 2. He
Yeah.
had benefited himself a lot from Nevada's recent legalization of gambling. And then President Truman, who was very much a product of the mobbed up Kansas City political machine.
He was the product of the Pendergast machine.
The Pendergast, yeah,
We
correct.
talked
Yeah.
about that. Yeah, we did a whole episode on that.
Yeah, I did. I
Yeah.
saw. Yeah, that was. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So right off the bat, people start to get kind of nervous between guys like Pat McCarran and Harry Truman and pretty much every other politician. Now, this is where the Federal Bureau of Narcotics actually steps in, which very like under-researched, I've come to find out. A lot of people don't. I mean, my perspective on organized crime took a whole different turn when I started looking at it from, documents from the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. Now, the FBI, of course, the first place that the Kefauver Committee goes to, and I'm sure you can guess where that goes. Yeah, Hoover says, I don't know.
Hoover, yeah,
We can't help you.
Yeah, mob don't exist, and yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So this is where Harry Anslinger of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics steps in, and he says, "Oh no, I could have proof that the mafia does exist." And here I happen to have two big books: the International Book of Narcotics Traffickers and the Mafia Book of Domestic Narcotics Traffickers. Now, pretty much everybody is starting to sweat, thinking that they're going to have to, expose all their, in their districts, all their judges and all their, cops that are all on the take. But thanks to Anslinger, with all his documentation, they all start to notice, oh, this is mostly Italian people and Jewish people and black people and other, undesirable groups, their words, not mine. And guess what? They all seem to have a lot of affiliations with the Longshoremen's Union and the Teamsters Union and the construction trade unions. So the way I've heard it described was pretty much everybody in Congress took a sigh of relief when they said, okay, we can shift it away from the people that we like and we can just put it all on blue collar workers, if that
Right,
makes sense.
sure.
Yeah. So that's where this all starts. Now, something that I'd like to point to is now I'll dip into a little bit of Kennedy assassination stuff, a figure that I was always really curious about that I don't hear a lot of people talk about. Tell me if you guys know much about him, was the Lieutenant Colonel Boris Pash and his special wet work group, PB7.
No, I don't know much about it. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't want to get too in the weeds on that. I can send you some stuff later. But I mean, I can send you the affidavit of E. Howard Hunt talking about how he went to Pash early, and then his testimony to the church committee where he did.
Yeah, I saw the church committee testimony. Okay.
Okay, yeah, where he did admit, yes, he was in charge of an assassination team, but he pretty much just left it at that. I mean, there's interesting murders. I'm working on documentation that maybe perhaps Willie Moretti, right before his testimony to the Kefauver committee, maybe that wasn't just a traditional mob hit. Maybe I don't want to sound too tinfoil hat, but I mean, there was a lot of people in the Kefauver committee that did have secrets, and a lot of the investigators were from Willie and Donovan's OSS also.
Right. And you're going to see this down the road when we talk about the other committees, when we get into the Castro plots and
Yeah.
those mysterious deaths that are going to happen in the 70s right around Hoffa.
Yeah.
A lot of those don't look like traditional mob hits when you really take a deep dive on them, but we'll get more into that. But this is where, like, see, this is where John and Bobby were really hammering down on organized crime here. So this is before, John was president. So that's why I always thought it was laughable when these people try to say that the mob helped the Kennedys get elected, because it's so stupid. Because why would they help them after this committee, after they were hammering them like this, and go on, and I looked into that. We did episodes on that, and we actually did one on the whole bootlegging thing with Old Man Kennedy. And
yeah,
I don't know if you've seen that one, but I came across Daniel Joseph Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
He was the bootlegger that was connected to guys like Oni Madden and Frank Costello and Al Capone and all these guys. He was no relation to the Kennedys. And this is the problem. This is where we get into a lot of that disinformation crap.
Yeah, and I mean, and that really snowballs over there. I mean, they're going to talk about the Marilyn Monroe thing in a little bit also. I mean,
yeah,
funny how these stories.
We did so many episodes on that. We had Don McGovern on. He's the best on Marilyn Monroe, and just
sure, yeah.
There's just so much, and that, like I always said, like the people that want to go down that angle, they have two goals. They want to make money. They want to assassinate the character of the Kennedys, but that never gets you to the truth about what happened. Like that stuff, looking into that stuff, it just. It's just such a, like you said before about the rabbit holes. Like that's a rabbit hole you never get out of.
No, I mean, and the longer you look at something, I mean, you're inevitably going to find questions that are unanswered. I mean, that's everything. So, well, either way. So, wrapping up that thing about the Kefauver committee, I wanted to point that out, and I wanted to do that tangent just because I think society's relationship to their perception of organized crime and its connection to organized labor. I think it starts with that, with the Kefauver committee kind of starting off compromised, where, they really had to cover their own selves, and then they kind of shift the blame onto the strictly blue collar element of it.
Sure.
So do we want to skip forward to the actual McClellan committee proper, which actually does get Hoffa directly involved?
Yeah, let's go. We could go to the McClellan committee.
Yeah, so the McClellan Committee, I mean, this is where Jimmy Hoffa becomes more of a household name. I mean, the thing that I try to point out to people, and a lot of people tend to not notice this, was if you look at the Republicans on it, it's Joseph McCarthy, Barry Goldwater, Carl Munt. I mean, these are pretty hard right guys, especially,
All right.
they
Yeah.
really are. And I'm going to sound like I'm bashing Bobby Kennedy a little bit. I'm going to shift most of my blame from him onto Walter Sheridan and perhaps the people that were, like I just said, look at the people that he's serving on the McClellan Committee with. I
And
mean,
Walter Sheridan to me is like when they connect him, like they always say he was such a close friend of Bobby Kennedy. I look at Walter Sheridan as an intel
mhm.
asset. And I mean, he has deep connections to the intelligence community. And I never looked at him as a true friend. He's one of those, what I like to call the fake friends that are always
Yeah.
around the Kennedys. And that's the way I look at Sheridan.
Oh yeah, I would agree. I mean, Sheridan is going to be yeah, he's going to be the main villain of this story more than Hoffa, funny enough.
And he should be. He should be. And,
Yeah,
because Sheridan, what he did with Jim Garrison down the road,
yeah.
he goes after Garrison terrible.
Yeah, well, it's funny. Garrison plays into the Hoffa saga just a little bit, funny enough. Anyway, so the way I'm looking at it is, I mean, I think that there was some pretty hard reactionary forces driving this vendetta between Bobby Kennedy and Jimmy Hoffa. I mean, as far as like the motivations for why it became such a public feud, I don't know if I can say. I can't speak for Bobby Kennedy, obviously. I mean, I do know that there's a lot of powerful Jim Crow senators that already have it out for the labor movement. Jimmy, you know, he is a tough guy. I mean, he makes his way to the very top of the Teamsters Union through some kind of, Machiavellian moves. There's also strong evidence that he might have cooperated with the McClellan Committee to sell out his predecessor, Dave Beck. That's not confirmed, but I think
I don't know about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard that, but I don't know. I don't know if I move. It doesn't track with Jimmy Hoffa's character.
You know what? No, I'm glad you said that because it really doesn't. And ultimately, I was just talking to Leslie Sharp about this.
Okay, she's a friend. We talked to Leslie.
Yeah, I like her a lot. Yeah. She I think Jimmy Hoffa was actually I'm trying to think of a better word for it than this, but I think he was like a pure enemy of the Kennedys in that it wasn't ideological. This isn't General Walker. This isn't Allen Dulles. This is just pure like,
You know how I looked at it? I look at it as like Bobby Kennedy and Jimmy Hoffa to me are like two pit bulls.
yeah,
And put them together, and like you said, there's these forces that are pushing them at each other.
yeah.
I mean, once one of them starts swinging, it's like neither one is backing down.
That's really it. And I mean, Bobby, I mean, let's not forget, I mean, he's pretty young. He hasn't really, really cut his teeth yet,
No,
and
not
he's,
at that point.
got, no, no, not at all. So, I mean, I'm willing to chalk a lot of mistakes that he made onto just he's being pushed by these external forces. And, he's also ambitious and he's got a lot to live up to.
Well, Bobby didn't have any fear. I mean, he proved that many times. He was going to stand up to anybody who he felt was in the wrong.
And I think that fear, I think there was even though they hated each other, I think there was a mutual respect between Hoffa and Bobby Kennedy because
There had to have been. I mean, well, one of the, I know we want to focus on the Nashville trial, but funny enough, one of his early trials, which gets Hoffa busted in a sting. I mean, um, Bobby and Jimmy, they really only met socially once, and it was at the home of a Teamsters public relation guy, Eddie Shafitz, and they have a dinner which seems to be uncomfortable. And I've read accounts from both perspectives. They just genuinely didn't like each other. I think Jimmy thought that Bobby was just a rich kid, and Bobby thought that Hoffa was just a violent thug, something to that extent. So again, it just goes back to like that pure hatred.
right.
Yeah, not ideological.
No, I agree.
Yeah. So where do we want to go from here? Sorry, I keep sidetracking off. There's so much.
Well, do we want to get into the Nashville Trials now? Because I really want to talk. I want to get into the Castro plots. I want to get into Hoffa's disappearance and all that, but I want to
Yeah.
lead up to that. And And then I want to talk too about your, Gladio, and
Yeah.
what Hoffa was like an American version of that. So I want to get into that too. But do you want to do the Nashville Trials first?
Yeah, sure. We can do that. So, yeah, he'd already gone through a couple highly publicized trials, one in New York, a few in Detroit, one in Washington, D.C. The Nashville trial is actually the most explicit. And again, there's some really deep political subtext that a lot of people don't really realize. So he's busted for what's called the test fleet. It's the test fleet trial, which is kind of kind of convoluted, where there was this company that existed on paper that it would seem was violating the Taft-Hartley Act because the way the federal government saw it was that it was this company, commercial carriers, funneling kickback money to Hoffa, but the company is under his wife's name. Just kind of white collary stuff. Now, funny enough, this is only a misdemeanor. Like it only would have netted him like 1 year in prison, but you wouldn't have thought that by the amount of money that the government was pumping into this trial. So they set it for Nashville, and this gets very interesting, and nobody really talks about this. So the one of the lawyer, I mean, Hoffa has a lot of lawyers, a lot of famous ones. Edward Bennett Williams, that's the big one. But when he gets down to Nashville, the lawyer that he hires, this guy ZT, aka Tommy Osborne, who actually had just made an appeal to the Supreme Court challenging Tennessee voting laws, where kind of like, these problems that we've been dealing with today with redistricting and gerrymandering. He basically brought this pretty landmark case up to the Supreme Court called Baker versus Carr that basically translates to one man, one vote. So, this is actually a pretty up and coming progressive minded lawyer that Hoffa retains and starts to, and he's this attorney in the Nashville trial, the test fleet trial. And another thing that Osborne does right off the bat is he petitions a challenge to their jury selection because, interestingly enough, the juries in that middle district of Tennessee that Nashville is in, they had what was called the key man system, which basically means juries are selected by a group of prominent Nashville citizens. So, this is like 1962, who, in Tennessee, what do you think that translates to?
Right.
Yeah. So he's got this pretty progressive minded lawyer, and Walter Sheridan, I mean, at this point, the Get Hoffa squad has been formed. And two really very interesting members of the Get Hoffa squad that I would like to point out real quick, Robert Peliquin and William G. Hundley. Now, what they would get up to after all of this is really very fascinating. We could probably flesh this out a little bit earlier. Actually, I'll sidetrack real quick. Hundley is a guy that's on my radar, particularly in regards to Joe Valachi, because as far as I can tell from everything that I've researched, Valachi was basically, I mean, he's picked up by the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, and according to the guy that was his handler at first, Frank Selvaggi, he makes it pretty clear that William Hundley of the Justice Department pretty much steals Valachi away from them, and he's the one that convinces Valachi to write his memoir, which was, according to him, very different from the things that Valachi was telling him. He even said that the FBI was calling it La Cosa Nostra, LACUASA, is calling it our cause or something like that. He said they never even used the word mafia. And just to finish up this sidetrack, I mean, I was able to find the Italian version of what Joe Valachi's story is, Vita di Capo Mafia, this mobster, Nicola Gentile. And no, God, this is all in Italian. I can't read it. There's a language school up the street from my house. I'm going to go see if they can translate it for me. But they did give one English translation to Valachi and to J. Edgar Hoover. Valachi actually said, yeah, that's the truth. But anyway, sorry, that was a sidetrack. But basically to say that with this one member of the Get Hoffa squad, I'm very, all right, I mean, I really am suspicious of the fact that he kind of interfered with the Valachi's story, and they seems like they sanitized or at least misguided a lot of things about it, particularly in regards to the Valachi Papers, the famous book I'm sure we've all read. So, yeah, that guy's on the Get Hoffa squad under Walter Sheridan.
Yeah.
We will be right back. DK's Corner, now located at 201 Cherry Street in Jessup, Pennsylvania, is serving up the area's best tasting food at respectable prices. Known for our great cheesesteaks, DK's also has delicious breakfast sandwiches, specialty coffees, and catering 7 days a week. You'll love the wraps, soups, and pizza too. We're now open Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., and Saturday, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. Visit DK's Corner on Facebook to see our daily specials, and make sure to follow and like us while you're there. We offer local delivery to homes and businesses, takeout, or come and dine in our new restaurant in Jessup. Call or text DK's Corner at 570-209-0278 or hit us up on DoorDash. And we thank DK's Corner for sponsoring That's Enough Out of You. We will be right back. Hey, Sean, I want to make sure that everybody knows about our Patreon. I know we mention it every once in a while on the show, but really important that people check out our Patreon. If you go to Patreon and search for That's Enough Out of You, or just click on the link in the description, you'll find we do an extra episode every week called The Speakeasy, and it's really usually just Sean and I kind of talking about the day's events, current events, and things like that. But a lot of exciting things. I mean, I know, Sean, you're constantly putting articles up there on our Patreon.
Yeah, and sometimes, Bill, we do bring on special guests. We had Dave Whelan on, we had Scranton Dave, and every now and then we bring Patreon members on. We've had different members, Scott Alfieri, Michael Pilch, Dan Hankey was on. So, there's an opportunity there if you want to come on the show with us. So there's a lot of things we're doing. Like you mentioned, Bill, the articles. I put articles up on a free site, but I also put articles on Patreon that's not available on the free site. We have a lot of times I put up future intel about guests that we have coming up and stuff that we have coming up on the podcast. And we created a great community there, Bill. There's a lot of chat goes on there. There's a community chat and a lot of the comments back and forth. Just the Patreon members always have great insight. So it's a community, Bill, and it's an opportunity for people to join for a really good price, Bill.
Yeah, I mean, you can't beat it. You can certainly become a free member if you want to. There's also tiered levels with subscription amounts, and just for $1 that gets you everything. I mean, the $1 gets you everything, including our weekly show. There's other tiers. I think, Sean, what is there? A $3 tier?
$3, a $5, a $10. I mean, and there's a $50 if people could afford to give $50.
Yeah, I mean, totally up to you. Once you join, you can make that decision, and certainly, there's no commitment. I mean, you could join for a month or 2 months or whatever you want, and then you can switch your subscription around. Totally up to you. I mean, that's, people love Patreon for that reason. It really is. It makes it easy. It's kind of, however you want to do it, however you want to join. And we certainly appreciate anybody who joins our Patreon and supports the show, because we definitely, Sean, we're not getting rich off of this podcast, that's for sure. But we definitely, appreciate any support that we get from our listeners.
And we also have our merchandise store. If people want to check out, we have the shirt that I have on now. We have mugs up there. We have cups, hats, anything you can do to help the podcast grow. We also have a bookshop up there, Bill, where all the authors that we have on our podcast, we have their books up. And it supports local bookstores, Bill. The money goes to local bookstores, a little bit to us, and then to the publisher and to the author. So it's a real good opportunity instead of buying Amazon and making
supporting billionaires.
Right, sure. There's an opportunity. And as far as Patreon, one last thing, Bill, if you want to join as a free member, we do put some stuff up there for the free members, and then if you like it and you want to upgrade, you can do that.
Absolutely. So definitely check out our Patreon. Like I said, there's a link in the description to our Patreon, or you can just go to Patreon and search for That's Enough Out of You, look for our logo, and just fill in the information and you can join. All right. That's it, Sean. We appreciate all of our Patreon members, and we hope that you guys will consider checking it out if you haven't joined. Thank you.
Buddy.
And Sheridan himself, we didn't say this earlier. I mean, he starts out as an FBI agent. He says he leaves the FBI because Hoover was too interested in communists, so he went to go work for the NSA, where he only works on communists. So
Yeah,
yeah,
go figure.
yeah. So, and again, like I said, the shadow of McCarthyism, I think, falls over this story more than anything because, again, Hoffa is the very successful, very powerful of the biggest labor union in the country, who's constantly getting W's for his members, you know. So we're in the Jim. Sorry, that was another side note. We go. So yeah, we're in the Jim Crow South. Walter Sheridan sets up shop in Nashville immediately. And it's very interesting that he is able to get in touch with a guy sitting in prison, a guy named Edward Grady Parton, who was, I don't want, I'm going to try not to get too sidetracked, but Parton is genuinely a pretty sinister figure and really a pretty dangerous guy who's sitting in jail for, I mean, you name it. I mean, he's already embezzling union funds. He helps a friend kidnap, their kids in the middle of a
Right.
custody battle. He kills some sailors in a hit and run accident, possession of a machine gun, statutory rape. I mean, the list goes on. So he's a genuinely rough guy. And all of a sudden, he seems to have a change of heart. And all of a sudden, he finds himself talking to Walter Sheridan. Now, him being a Hoffa intimate, he somehow finds his way to the hotel that Hoffa and his camper set up shop in during the test fleet trial.
Right.
And so a lot of this is actually, I have to give a lot of credit to this. And I don't think this got any traction or nobody really knows about this. An Ohio law professor, William Tabak, he's the one that filed all the FOIA and conducted a lot of these interviews. And the little book that he put out, it only came out a couple of years ago, but it says it all. I mean, basically, they set up Parton to be a spy. It really does violate Hoffa's Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendment rights. I mean, he's stealing paperwork, he's stealing documents. At one point, he's provided so much information for the prosecution that Jim Neal, the lead prosecutor in the case, who would go on to be prosecutor in the Watergate, he knew everything that the defendant was going to say, and they literally said, "Hey, how did you know that?" And he says with a straight face, "I'm psychic." Uh, but they basically had, yeah, they had to spy on him the entire time. I mean, we're going to get into like the politics of like wiretapping. I mean, this was all technically illegal back then. Wiretapping really didn't even become super acceptable until the 1968 Omnibus Crime Control Act.
Right.
Yeah, and up until then, it was still just a very ambiguous, like electronic eavesdropping, they called it.
Let
Uh,
me ask you this, Steve. Am I reading into this, or are you thinking that the shadow of intelligence here, especially through Walter Sheridan,
yeah.
is kind of behind this effort to put the screws to Jimmy Hoffa to maybe get him to be a tool of the intelligence community?
You know what? Actually, funny enough, and we didn't get into this part earlier because there's a million areas we could go into, and just for time constraints. But one of the big things that happens early on in Jimmy's career after he becomes a organizer in the Teamsters Union is he went under the tutelage of a very famous, and unless you're like a socialist labor nerd, you really probably have never heard of this guy, but a very famous Trotskyist and trade unionist Farrell Dobbs out in
Mm-hmm.
Minneapolis, and he's actually like a mentor to Jimmy Hoffa. Now, Hoffa was not a socialist or a communist. Um, I think Hoffa, though, he was an atheist, which I think is why I don't think he cared about communism. And him being an atheist, I think he didn't have that propaganda of godless communism coming to take over America. I mean, that was part of why he was so controversial, is he kind of openly, coerced with gangsters and communists.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the early McClellan hearings, Bobby Kennedy actually tries to red bait him a lot with his association with Harry Bridges, the openly communist president of the Longshoremen's Union in California. And it's actually when he gets sent back to Minneapolis in the 40s, and he actually does fight against Farrell Dobbs, and Dobbs ends up going to prison, prosecuted under the Smith Act. I actually think that might have been the first place that Hoffa has his brush with some sort of, dare I say, deep state elements.
Sure. Because it would make so much sense, because if he's close to people who are communist or perceived communists,
Yeah.
they would gather information for him. He would be the perfect tool, perfect asset for them to use.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing I didn't mention earlier, but as far as his when we were talking about how his first entry with organized crime was to get them to stay neutral in the first big citywide strike that he was part of engineering. He would kind of go on to abet some of them, particularly the two top narcotics traffickers in Detroit, John Pritziola and Rafael K. Serrano. He provides them cover by giving them a fake Teamsters local. And so I'm not going to say, I mean, they describe guys like Santo Trafficante as $1 million men, is that they do receive, protection from the CIA. I think Hoffa was probably on a list of potential $1 million men, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah. So anyway, where were we? Walter Sheridan.
Sheridan, yeah.
Yeah. So as far as this goes, I mean, right, yeah, right off the bat, I mean, Hoffa actually gets the test fleet case is actually it ends up being an acquittal, but if you look at it now from looking back, it seems kind of obvious that the purpose for the test fleet case was actually to set up and coerce Hoffa into a jury tampering trial, which would later end up getting moved to Chattanooga, and that's actually where he gets busted. And I mean, really getting into the roots of that, and I mean, this all kind of comes out in a lot of the FOIA requests where that William Tabak, who I mentioned earlier, he actually is brought to light, which I'm kind of bummed nobody talks about because I feel like this changes a lot of the perspective when you look at it from this lens of, labor versus capital. It's pretty obvious that the instances of jury tampering actually are coordinated and instigated by Walter Sheridan. Right off the bat, he has three private detectives that he hires from Huntington, West Virginia, that they come down to Nashville. He basically tells them that he instructed, and they've all admitted this post, and they were actually brought into the jury tampering. They had charges of jury tampering brought to them right after the Chattanooga trial, and they were all acquitted. So what does that tell you? But he
Yeah.
basically had this plan where he was going to have the cops call prospective jurors because since the FBI, through that key man system voting jury selection that I mentioned earlier, the FBI has access to all the potential jurors. So they had the list of all the jurors, and they basically did these very disconnected phone calls where they would call the prospective jurors and just ask real simply, do you have any feelings on the Hoffa trial coming up? So that immediately, gets all these potential jurors tainted. And it's very easy to swing that back onto Hoffa's camp. Am I making sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Now, at the end of the day, one really interesting thing when I was talking about Hoffa's attorney, Tommy Osborne, he gets entrapped into he himself gets entrapped into being convicted of jury tampering through the efforts of I want to say he was a Nashville police officer or a state trooper. I can't remember off the top of my head, but Walter Sheridan basically uses him. He basically has him go set at this point, Osborne, and he said this so much, and his family corroborated this, that he did acknowledge that he probably needed to fight fire with fire at some point. Because I mean, it was very obvious that something was going on. The Judge Wilson, in the original Nashville trial, he even said early on, "Who's Walter Sheridan? Is he a lawyer?" And they said no. And he said, "Oh, well, stop letting him hang around here." So Sheridan was never allowed into the actual courtrooms. But he convinces this, crooked state trooper Robert Vick to go coerce Osborne into jury tampering, where he keeps putting the idea into Osborne's head, and then they finally wire him up, and then they go in and they basically finally he puts the words into Osborne's mouth, and at that point Osborne basically says, "All right, if we can, flip this one juror, then I guess this is how we could go about it." And then that's it. Osborne, like I've said earlier, I mean, he was a rising star in the Nashville legal scene because of his success with the Baker versus Carr case on one man, one vote. He had a really promising career ahead of him, but it would seem that there was some external political pressures because they didn't want to prosecute him. The Nashville bar, he was actually really liked. and they didn't want to prosecute him, but political pressures said absolutely prosecute him to the fullest extent, and he did end up going to jail. Now, the reason I wanted to focus on that part, now this is very interesting. In John Larry Ray's book, James Earl Ray's brother, he says, he makes this illusion that after Osborne got out of prison, that he was supposed to go represent his brother, James Earl Ray, which I've never actually seen that anywhere. But Larry Ray says this in his book, and Osborne ended up killing himself. Now, it's funny that Larry Ray and even Peter Dale Scott, who I have a lot of respect for, in an essay said something similar, that Jimmy Hoffa's lawyer had some weird parapolitical connections to, the assassination of Martin Luther King. I would have to say, no, his entire legal career was ruined, and he was disgraced and sent to prison, and he killed himself because of that. They try to kind of shove this weird angle of there was some parapolitical intrigue into that. People say that Hoffa was very interested in because he was in prison at that point. He was very interested in the assassination of Martin Luther King, more than the assassination of Bobby Kennedy. I don't think he was openly glad about that, but I don't think he cried over it either. But apparently he was very interested in the King assassination because he did know King, and he actually had a relationship with them. There was the famous murder of the civil rights activist Viola Liuzzo. Murdered by KKK. Her husband actually they were Detroit natives. He was actually a Teamsters official, and Hoffa, I'm not going to say he was like, out there marching with people. I mean, I've heard accounts that maybe he, might have used some outdated language in regards to black people, but he publicly gave his support to Martin Luther King after the Viola Liuzzo murder. He gives $20,000 to this SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Council. He meets with King at least once to discuss how to actually conduct a full strike. King himself, the day he was assassinated, he was down there helping the striking sanitation workers. So there was that relationship between the civil rights and the labor movement.
Walter Sheridan to me is such a despicable character. He really is. Like we did an episode. I don't know if you're familiar with the researcher Bill Davey, but we did
I got his book right here. Yeah.
Okay. Probably over 2 years ago now. But it was fantastic. He did a deep dive on Sheridan. He said he was no friend of Bobby Kennedy's. He had deep intel ties, and everything that Sheridan does, to me, isn't to help Bobby Kennedy, it's to help the intelligence community. And that's the way I looked at it ever since I started, reading Bill Davey's great work.
Yeah. I was trying to, so a lot of the information that I've come to find out about Sheridan, a lot of it comes from sources that I don't particularly trust. Namely the Lyndon LaRouche organization, Executive Intelligence Review. They really zeroed in on Sheridan. Now, it's funny enough. They said that he was part of this the Five Eyes. You know what I'm talking about? The Five Eyes private investigator. I can't find that actually truly exists, but the Three Eyes did, and that was other Hoffa Squad member Robert Peliquin's group, which turns into Intertel, which goes on to be owned by Resorts International, which has casinos in the Bahamas where organized crime moved into after Cuba, and Atlantic City, where a guy named Donald Trump was briefly in charge of Resorts International.
That's not even trying to talk about it.
But I know. So, and I'm fleshing this part out just like I'm trying to flesh out what exactly did William Hundley do to Valachi's real memoirs, and what exactly were they sanitizing away from the public in what Valachi said. I'm starting to wonder if there was just a cross, like the wires got crossed on the information, and it was Peliquin's Three Eyes, his private security firm that goes on to be part of Resorts International, and they do security for the NFL. And I'm starting to wonder.
Let me throw this out there, because a lot of Valachi's information would be what the public would see of the mafia later on. So would this be, powers to be, the intelligence community controlling that information of what they want released?
I would have to imagine it does, and it probably has to do with protected narcotics trafficking. because Valachi, he was I can't remember what racket it was. I haven't read that book in a while, but it was the jukebox, or he was squeezed out of his jukebox operation. So he started to get into heroin trafficking, and it was actually part of a big international bust from a gangster named Sal Ronaldo. And that's how the Federal Bureau of Narcotics got him, and that's why he was the FBN, this FBN agent Frank Selvaggi. That was his guy. That was his case that the FBI stole away from him. So, I mean, there was a big rivalry between the FBN and the FBI. I mean, they also are not innocent. I mean, Harry Anslinger, like we said earlier, with the formation of the Kefauver Committee, I mean, they really did a good job of pushing all the crimes down to the blue collar, to the street level, as opposed to the people
Sure.
at the very top. Um,
Sure.
so yeah, it probably did have to do with these million-dollar men, and they're
We
protected.
we did a whole episode kind of how the overworld and the underworld connect
Yeah.
and everything, and it's how what they were trying to do is protect that overworld, and the underworld, kind of put that out there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. And, that's why, I think that the day I remember the day that I realized that Hoffa maybe, I mean, not the greatest guy, but I mean, not the arch villain that he's portrayed to be, is when he said it. He said, they use gangsters just as much as I do. So why is it a
Yeah.
problem when the voice for the working man needs gangsters? They use gangsters too. I mean, what, Frank Costello and Meyer Lansky? I mean, Lansky was like on the board of like some oil company or something, like these, you know.
Well, the government used them in Operation Underworld to
Oh,
protect
well,
blacks against the Nazis.
oh yeah, of course.
Sabotage, I mean, it's the long history. But let's talk a little bit about your theory about, Hoffa as a tool for a version of American Gladio.
Well, you know what? Funny enough, there actually is kind of a literal connection to Gladio. Earlier, I mentioned, I mean, it's kind of like the seeds of what would become Operation Gladio during the Cold War. But I
Right.
mentioned earlier, he provides cover for a paper Teamsters local in Detroit. Um, a Sicilian-born gangster named Frankie Coppola. There's an amazing article. I'll have to send it to you. You can put in the show notes by an Italian journalist where he interviews Frankie Coppola at the end of his life. Coppola and not Matt, Coppola and Sam Carolla, the boss of New Orleans before Marcello.
Marcello.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They get deported back to Italy, and they seem to be pretty comfy with members of, of William Donovan and the World Commerce
Yeah.
Corporation, and the remains of the Mussolini's secret police, and actually the P2 Masonic Lodge. I think this is the first time I've ever heard of the P2 Masonic Lodge, if you're familiar with that outfit. It would come out later in the Vatican banking scandals. So there actually is kind of and he's deeply participates in swinging the 1948 Italian election away from the communists, who were slated to win over the Christian Democrats, which is the political organ of the Vatican. So there's that. There is actually kind of a literal connection between Hoffa and Gladio. But uh, I would point out that sometimes I think, because America, we don't really have a strong class analysis. We I think we tend to lose sight of that whole labor versus capital argument.
Right.
So part of me almost wants to say, I don't know if I might even take back the answer I was going to give planned, because I feel like our whole society is kind of just like a long running Operation Gladio. If that makes sense. I was thinking about
Yeah.
that the other day.
Yeah.
I mean, people like people like Mae Brussel, they thought that there might have been. I mean, I don't subscribe to any of these theories, but with the rise of serial killers in the 1970s, and the oil shocks and the stagflation. I mean, the world genuinely seemed like it was probably ending. And I mean, that's actually the time when Hoffa's out of prison, when he has his sentence commuted by Nixon. And in Detroit, I mean, it actually does turn into a literal war zone between the sides that are loyal to the new president, Frank Fitzsimmons, and the guys that were loyal to Hoffa. I mean, by the end of his life, Hoffa actually had the support of the rank and file, including some of the new left members. I mean, I can't imagine Hoffa would have been that interested in the new left movement at that time, the late 60s, early 70s, but they actually had Hoffa's back over Frank Fitzsimmons. Now, I think this gets into Gladio proper if there is such a thing as the American Gladio. Because Fitzsimmons was very close with the Nixon administration, and so was the
Yeah.
AFL-CIO, George Meany and Walter Reuther, who even to this day is considered, they really like to do that Scarface thing where, they say
Yeah.
good night to the bad guy. But Hoffa's always the crooked bad guy. Walter Reuther's the Boy Scout. I mean,
We did an episode on Jay Lovestone, and we
I
talked a lot about Meany.
I was gonna, yeah, I was gonna cite that episode that you did. Yeah.
Yeah.
So even today, I mean that, they were the yeah, the AFL-CIO was the compromised one. And I mean, Hoffa, as compromised as you can say he was through his associations with organized crime, he actually was his own guy, and all he really did care about was the Teamsters Union. I've looked, that's all he like lived and breathed for, was getting his members, better contracts. And by
Yeah.
the time Fitzsimmons takes over, I mean, he completely sells out the membership. I mean, he reneges on all these, because Hoff had actually executed the master freight agreement, which raised universally all the wages for everybody in the Teamsters Union across the country. So a guy from, Montgomery, Alabama is making the same as somebody in Seattle. Now, I don't know if there's any reactionary audience members. I mean, that sounds like the type of thing that they would really hate to hear. But the thing in America is we need money to buy stuff to keep the economy going. We need to buy cars and appliances and
Yeah.
clothes.
Kind of the point of capitalism, right?
Right. So it's always ironic to me when I hear, conservative types scream about, well, we can't, raise the minimum wage. It's like, well,
Yeah.
we need to buy stuff
Right.
Exactly.
to keep it going.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, Frank Fitzsimmons, we could have done a whole episode on literally every
Well, I think,
one of these
would you
points.
agree with this? The big difference between Hoffa and Fitzsimmons is Hoffa would be able to say no to organized crime figures, where Fitzsimmons never would. Whatever they want the pension fund, whatever loan they want, whatever they want, if Fitzsimmons would give them. That's why they didn't want Jimmy back in, because they were happy with the relationship with Fitzsimmons.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, yeah, I don't think there's a whole heck of a lot more to it than that. I mean, also, I mean, Fitzsimmons, it would be revealed that he was an informant for the IRS and the FBI after he died. Same with the other Jackie Presser. That story's a little bit more well known. Jackie Presser was a Teamsters president later. But and it so far has been revealed that Fitzsimmons was receiving a lot of political protection from the Nixon administration. I mean, he was already serving on like a board of advisors for the wage and price controls that the Nixon administration had in place to fight the stagflation. And they were really the only union that was on board with Nixon. He wasn't super popular at the time. I mean, even the AFL-CIO, they didn't want us to come out and support George McGovern, but there was a meeting between Nixon and George Meany where he said, all right, we won't support you, but we won't fight you actively. So, yeah. And as far as well, where do we want to go from here? Sorry, I keep
Well, what I
going
really
on.
want to get into, there's a couple big ticket items here that we have to talk about, and we're pressing on time here because we were covering a lot of ground here. We're covering a lot of ground, but let's talk about the Castro plots, because there's a lot of. Okay, so we know what we know is we have this plot with the CIA and the Mafia.
Yeah.
Through Johnny Roselli. He brings in Giancarlo Trafficante, and they're trying to kill Fidel Castro. Now, there's reports, and it started with the Time Life was the first time that it was revealed that there was an earlier plot between Jimmy Hoffa, and he brings in Russell Buffalino, local boss, which is about 20 minutes from where we are now.
Yeah.
And to kill Castro. Now, the problem with the Time Life is the Time Life was owned by Claire Booth Luce and Henry Luce, who have deep ties to Dulles and the CIA. And Claire Booth Luce was very close with David Atlee Phillips of the CIA. They would end up, person as a Zapruder film, and we know what disaster that turned into. So I'm real skeptical of anything coming out from the Luce family. But then, you get books like The Quiet Dawn, which is a book on Russell Buffalino, and they talk about that. But the problem I have with that is they have it that the whole thing was coming from the Kennedy presidency, and he was pushing that plot. Well, the timeline don't add up because those plots started under Eisenhower. So if this
Yeah.
plot with Jimmy Hoffa and Russell Buffalino and the CIA started before that, then that's in either way, it's in Eisenhower. So it has nothing to do with Kennedy.
Yeah.
But they bring him in because they want to bring that into the Kennedy assassination plot. So that book, to me, that part of it doesn't fly for me. And then of course they bring it into another book, Ultimate Sacrifice, which is a book that I don't, the whole premise of that I don't agree with at all.
Yeah.
So bring it into there. So let me ask you this. Do you think there was a prior plot? Because I don't see, there's no documentation that we have that could back it up. Do you think there was a prior plot with Hoffa and Buffalino with the CIA? I mean, it makes sense that they would want Jimmy,
Yeah.
but I just don't see that. Like, there's no evidence to me that we could back up besides coming from like Time Life and these other characters.
It's interesting because the Time article, and I've reread it multiple times, it comes out in 1975, and it's really actually pretty slim. It really doesn't say a lot. It doesn't source anybody. It just says that the CIA may have approached Russell Buffalino, Sal Granello, and Jimmy Plumieri, all Northeast area gangsters.
Those two guys end up dead.
Yeah, they do.
Like Hoffa, they end up dead.
Right. Well, the more interesting version, and this is important to point out because this actually will directly go into what would kind of guide a lot of the literature, especially in regards to the Kennedy assassination, starting with the HSCA. So there's a 1976 biography of a Chicago gangster named Charles Cromaldi. You familiar with him?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So it's in that book where Cromaldi claims that him and Mad Sam DeStefano, a very, very dark guy.
Crazy guy, one of the craziest gangsters in history.
I'm shocked with as into true crime as everybody is in these days that nobody talks about this. Yeah, either way. So in this book, Cromaldi insists that him and Mad Sam DeStefano were approached by Sam Giancana to basically say, you guys are both facing stiff prison sentences. I have connections with the CIA. If you guys can go down and kill Fidel Castro, we can probably get you out of these prison sentences you're looking at. Now, Cromaldi goes on to tell the guy who wrote the book, John Kidner, that it was that Sam Giancana was murdered by one rogue CIA agent. And that same rogue CIA agent is the guy that killed Jimmy Hoffa, which this had just happened, about a year after.
I hate that word rogue. I hate when they use that word rogue. With the CIA, there's rogue.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. It is quite stupid. So
that's why they have the opposite security to make sure there's no rogue.
Well, right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So Cromaldi says that it's a rogue CIA agent that approached the outfit. So specifically Sam Giancana and Mad Sam DeStefano to go whack Castro, and that the same rogue CIA agent was responsible for the murders of Sam Giancana, Jimmy Hoffa, and Johnny Roselli. And he says because Hoffa, along with who did he say? He said that the original people were
does he mention Buffalino?
No, he doesn't. That's the funny thing. I want to say he mentions Giancana.
Okay.
He mentions Hoffa and Giancana together as the original liaisons.
Okay.
Now, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Although I will say, as far as the other gangsters that get murdered around this time, Richard Kane, Charlie Nicoletti, guys like this, they actually are in this. They are in this clique with Mad Sam DeStefano.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting that at the time, DeStefano was being leaned on really hard by Charlie Siragusa, formerly of the FBN. At the time, he was a member of the Illinois Crime Commission.
Yeah.
And just a couple of years before, Siragusa said he was approached by the CIA to form an assassination squad. I'm sure you're familiar with that. He said that to the church committee also. So I don't have anything concrete on this yet. I've been working on fleshing it out, but DeStefano, he's in the orbit of all this. I'm not saying that they were technically involved, but it seems like there might be something there. We got Siragusa and we got.
Here's the interesting thing, and you brought this up about the murders.
Yeah.
Like, I don't believe that Jimmy Hoffa or the mob was involved in the Kennedy assassination, except maybe, like we talked about this, maybe to shut up Oswald. But that's the level. And the only person, I believe Johnny Roselli, but I believe Roselli was acting as a CIA contract agent for the mafiosa. But the thing that, and we talked about this off the air, the suspicious deaths that are around these investigations, the church committee, the House Select Committee, there's a period there of about 2 years where so many people that would have been, their testimony would have been embarrassing to the CIA, to say the least, ends up dead or commit suicide, or because you have Gene Connor, you have Nicoletti, you have later on, you have Roselli, you have Richard Kane, like you mentioned, you have the Mornshell down the road. You know, and even in that same time period, you have William Harvey dies of a heart attack. And listen, when the CIA comes out with a heart attack gun at the church committee, you can't rule anything out after that. And then you also have David Morales dies a little later on, and there's suspicions about that one. So you have all these deaths. You have Carlos Prio. In that same thing. You have William Polly, who was involved with anti-Castro. I mean, I could go on. There's about 20 people that are just dying in this time period that they would have been called to testify before these committees, and it would have been embarrassing to the agency. I mean, I'm not saying all of them were CIA hits. It's just fascinating that the CIA got that lucky.
Yeah, which well, I mean, that covers that. The reason I wanted to specifically mention the Grimaldi thing, because I mean, if you and I read that today by today's standards, that sounds pretty silly, especially because that's as far back as I could trace, other than the Time article linking Hoffa to the Castro plots being the pre-Mayhew, pre-Roselli plots. But Grimaldi acts as a big source for Dan Moldea's The Hoffa Wars. And it's not the first book to implicate organized crime in the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Actually, the first one is a book called The Grim Reapers by a guy named Ed Reed that comes out in the 60s, and it mentions the Marcello take the stone out of my shoe, you know, all that.
Yeah, and we discredit that. There's a witness, Gino Minari.
I know where you're going with this.
Discredits that whole Marcello, that whole thing that Ed Becker, he totally discredits that Becker on that.
Right. No, exactly. So so Moldea's The Hoffa Wars, I mean, he works with Michael Ewing of the House Select Committee on Assassinations. And he ends up kind of like saying what G. Robert Blakey would say right after, you know, likely conspiracy at the hands of Trafficante, Marcello, and Hoffa. So that's what's introduced into the literature at that point going on. And it would seem the big source that would implicate Hoffa in the the pre-Mayhew plots is this guy Grimaldi, which, I mean, his memoir, I mean, it's very hard to find. I have it right here. There's no index or anything, so I don't know. What does that tell you?
In, you know, Mayhew has Chicago ties. He was in that FBI with Bannister and Harvey and Jim McCord. And the thing is, it's plausible that Mayhew to Roselli had contact with Buffalino and Hoffa. He could definitely went that route, because the Mayhew Roselli connection goes back way before the plots.
Right.
So it's plausible. I just need to see something document. There's so much documentation on the actual Mayhew plots. But on this prior plot with Hoffa.
Yeah, and I mean, I've just never seen anything concrete. I mean, the reason I mentioned that whole thing about the Hoffa Wars and the Ed Reed book is because, you know, I don't believe it, but that's just where these ideas come from and they snowball. It's funny you mentioned Ultimate Sacrifice, because actually it's not the second edition, Legacy of Secrecy. I actually think that book is really enjoyable to read. I don't agree with it, but I kind of like the way he.
But I always said, like, if you just took that book and you took all the mob stuff out of it, and you just put like Harvey and Morales and Phillips, pretty interesting stuff there. But when they other stuff and they bring in this you know, invasion of Cuba and all this other stuff, that's just you lose me completely.
No, I agree. I just think it was a really interesting blend of all these theories. But anyway, but yeah, so yeah, that's where all that comes from. And no, like yourself, I haven't seen any real documentation other than all I can trace it back to is the Charles Cromaldi biography where he makes this claim but doesn't really back it up by anything. He blames it on a rogue CIA agent.
See, that's a little different too because he doesn't match Buffalino. So that's
No, exactly. So I don't even know where Buffalino came into the
well,
picture.
Time mentions him.
Well,
So
right, but where they got that from.
yeah, well, you got to wonder though if, and I'm just speculating here, but Time Life, when you're talking about the Luce family,
Yeah,
the CIA wanted to take out Jimmy Hoffa.
yeah,
That's a way to do it because you mentioned
yeah.
Buffalino. All of a sudden, but the guy who was protecting Hoffa
Hmm.
all these years was Buffalino. Now all of a sudden, Buffalino sees his name there. So that's one way. That's speculation at my point. But let's talk about the disappearance.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I have a lot of questions on that. I know I don't know if you know the new evidence out there now. It's not really new. Fox
No.
reported it wrong, of course.
Yeah.
It was an old 302 report
Yeah.
that said that Billy Giacalone was the actual killer.
Yeah.
Hoffa, and there was an informant that said that. Here's what I always believe. I always have problems with whatever you think, whoever was behind it, whether Detroit did the work or whatever, it had to be approved at the commission level if you're it was the mafia, or do you assume maybe there was CIA involvement? But the thing is, we know the Frankie Sheeran, the Irishman story, we know he told a lot of lies, we know that. But the thing is, like, the problem I have is from the evidence that we have, you have to put Jimmy in that car because he's at Red Max Box restaurant, right?
Yep.
And he gets in a car, witnesses seen him, and it wasn't, he got in on his own. So to me, if you take Frankie Sheeran out of that, like, he's one of the few guys that Hoffa would trust to get in that car because Jimmy's got to know his street sense. You talked about how smart he was.
Yeah.
He's got to know that if he gets in that car with anybody associated with Tony Giacalone or Tony Pro Provenzano, he's going to get whacked. And he's got to know that. So was his ambition to get back into the Union that great that he would let his street sense down that much? Like, to me, it's just like, if somebody had to lure him in that car. Like, that's my biggest problem with the whole thing. How do you feel about it?
So Chucky O'Brien would seem to be the missing piece on
But
that.
didn't they have a bad falling out before?
Yes and no. I mean, he would have trusted. Well, I mean, it was also funny. The thing with Frank Sheeran, and one of the biggest holes in his whole story, that he changes everything by the end of his life when he gets Charles Brandt to write that book.
Sure.
Sheeran was actually a member of the pro Hoffa wing of the Teamsters, so it would have been strange that it would have made more sense if he was on the Fitzsimmons wing to help abduct Hoffa. But as far as I could tell, I mean, it's interesting that Sal Bergoglio, I actually have a couple reasons to believe that he was actually the killer. Chucky O'Brien was probably driving the car. And Tony Giacalone's brother, Billy Jack Giacalone, might have been the third passenger. There's pretty convincing evidence. David Tubman, he's done a lot of work on it looks as if Chucky O'Brien matched the description of multiple witnesses as the one driving the car. It's funny we were mentioning the CIA because Bergoglio, and he would get murdered himself in 78. Yeah, gunned down in Little Italy. He actually says that he blames the FBI and the CIA for his murder. And just in one of the real life people I've been able to talk to and interview, a woman whose brothers were mixed up in this, she also told me that she blamed the CIA also. And Chucky O'Brien also blames the CIA, or he did when he was trying to write a memoir of his own. So I noticed the people who have associations with organized crime actually seem to blame the CIA a lot. So that's very interesting.
So you think O'Brien would have had the sway then to get Jimmy in that car, even with somebody connected to, even like Giacalone and somebody connected to Tony Pro, knowing often knows that they're going to kill him?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say because, I mean, we know he got into the car, so it's like,
We do, we know that.
yeah. So,
Why would Jimmy do that? Like Jimmy's got to know they want to kill him.
I mean, the wild card name that kind of came out in the last few years, and it was funny because the two books, the one we mentioned, the Hoffa Wars and the Teamsters by Stephen Brill, both come out about the same time, 78. And both of them were hit with lawsuits by this guy, Lenny Schultz. He was an old prohibition, like the Purple Gang member. And it would come out now, and apparently this is all proven, that this was all orchestrated to go to Lenny Schultz's house, where he had already been, doing similar murders for the Giacalone brothers.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm inclined to believe that O'Brien was probably the one driving the car. There is actually a weird gap in his timeline of his story of events. His stepson, Jack Goldsmith. I mean, he puts together some interesting things, but at the same time, I mean, he leaves out a lot of pretty ugly things about Chucky O'Brien. I mean, he really was a thug and a leg
Oh, he
breaker.
was.
Yeah.
So you don't think there was any CIA involvement in this? You think it was strictly a mob hit? Or are you going to leave that door
If you
open?
want to, at the place I'm at now, with what I've been putting together and documenting, I think Fitzsimmons actually had a lot to do with it, more
Okay.
so. And Fitzsimmons was getting active protection by the Nixon administration by guys like John Mitchell. So, I mean, if you want to put that in the same category as the CIA, something like that, I think that's
I
on the
still
right
think
track.
though, as far as from the mob's perspective, though, the order would have had to come from commission and from Chicago.
Well, right, of
I don't think
course. Yeah.
Detroit would have did this on their own.
No, of course.
They would have had to answer to the commission.
I mean, I'm inclined to believe that it was Bergoglio who was in Tony Provenzano's crew from New Jersey. I mean, they're the Genovese family.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, Tony Pro's not going to make a move without his bosses giving that order.
No, but you know what I will say, they were all Provenzano and Bergoglio and they were all actually squeezed pretty hard at the end of their lives. Or not the end of their lives. Towards the end of it, they were all squeezed really hard because they were already facing murder charges for another guy that they had murdered, Anthony Castellito. So they would keep using this as leverage. They kept saying, "Where's Hoffa? Where's Hoffa?" And none of them, I mean, they were all about to face stiff prison sentences. It's interesting that Bergoglio is the one that gets whacked out of all of them, though.
Yeah.
So that kind of flies in the face of what I had said previously, but it is interesting to point out that they,
Something
yeah.
you just said though is going to send me on my next rabbit hole assignment. Is I'm going to look for Frank Fitzsimmons ties to the agency
Okay.
because
So it's documented that he was an IRS and FBI informant and conversations that he was having at the La Costa Country Club. I'm sure you know all about this.
Mhm.
And Nixon's first post-Watergate shame outing is golfing with Tony Provenzano and Frank Fitzsimmons at the La Costa. I think it was the Frank Fitzsimmons International Tournament. I think they named the tournament after him. Because Fitzsimmons did flip and he, basically became a proxy for the Nixon administration. Hoffa had supported Republicans and Democrats both, but I think that was just whoever was going to be the most pro-labor to his satisfaction.
Sure.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, if anybody's the guys from Finding Hoffa, it's a podcast. I can't quite figure out what their angle is. I mean, they're pretty convinced that Hoffa's body ends up in the Upper Peninsula. And look, they lay out a lot of interesting things. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that the body was incinerated at Central Sanitation, which was owned by the guy who was receiving the cover, Rafael Caserano, top narcotics pusher in Detroit. Interesting to point out that Central Sanitation would be burned down and ruled as the result of arson just 2 years later. I mean, I can't think of any other explanation as to why the body was never found. It was incinerated.
Yeah, I agree with that. I
Yeah.
agree with that.
Mm.
So yeah, it's just fascinating, and I don't put any stock in some of these, these gangsters that have podcasts that want to throw themselves like Francis and
Oh yeah,
Sammy Gravano. They wanted these guys that were made in the '70s, right when Hoffa disappeared.
yeah.
You know what I mean? And they're
Yeah.
telling the stories about they know this, they know that. Like they wouldn't have knowledge of what went on then.
No, I agree. Yeah, that's why I mean, I'm not gonna say that like the earliest things that I was exposed to are, the reports and the articles and the documentation that happened around much closer to the time of when this all happened. I think that would be on more of the right track than, something that comes out, 2 years ago.
Right. Yeah, so Steve, we've been over an hour here. This has been fascinating stuff. I mean, this is great. Billy, you got anything, buddy?
No, just Steve. First of all, thank you for being a Patreon. We definitely appreciate that. That's
Okay. Yeah, I like your show.
To us. Yeah, we appreciate it. And this has been great. Yeah, hopefully you'll come back and talk to us some more.
No, I feel bad. Because there's so many. Just every part of this whole saga, everything just from his roots as in the Teamsters Union to the Kefauver to the anti-Castro to the Nashville Trials. We didn't even talk about the more fascinating one, the other sting operation that he got. But I mean, Joe Louis figures in. I mean, God, we could do like an hour of all every angle of this.
Hard to get all this in an hour. It really is. It's
no, I was
so
even
much
thinking.
information.
You know what? I was even thinking because I got the. I used to tell people all the time that you could read his Playboy, Hoffa's last interview with Playboy, until I realized that was behind a paywall. But I actually have I bought it for the article.
Yeah, I know. That's why Billy buys his.
That's right. Yes.
Right. So I was even thinking if you guys want to do a speakeasy, we could actually read through it.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that'd be great.
We could set that up.
Sure.
Yeah, something if you want to. I'm just
definitely.
Sorry, I hope I didn't. Yeah, like I said, I hope I didn't sidetrack too much.
No, but I mean, I think everything we talked about today is just super important because there's a lot of disinformation out there and a lot of stuff, but it's still a lot of questions. Still a lot of questions. Like all those murders are so questionable to me just because of the time frame they happen, and the fact that if those people didn't get killed or didn't die, and they testified, their testimony would have been damning to the agency. Really damning.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So,
well, before, I mean, Mayhew said himself there might have been. He said there probably was plots before he was approached. Actually, I think Charles Saragusa, what he said to the church committee, that he was approached to set up an assassination team. I think that's very interesting. I think Mad Sam DiStefano. The fact that he seems to be associated with a lot of the guys that we talked about getting whacked, I don't know. There might be something there. I'm kind of just treating that like
we'll have to do an episode on him. That he seems like
got to do an episode of Amanda. He is just beyond crazy. He is just, man.
A while ago, I was on a podcast where we were talking about the parapolitical implications of the movie The Exorcist, and in the book The Exorcist, the one by William Peter Blatty. It struck me as very odd that at the beginning they have a quote about good and evil. They have a quote about Nazi concentration camp, and then they have the FBI wiretaps of Angelo La Pietra talking about torturing. He was a Chicago outfit gangster about torturing a guy. It was hung up on a meat hook with basically
William Jackson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I always thought that was so bizarre. Because that book came out in like 70. I don't know how many people had access to those types of things. So that always struck me. And I mean, they said, I think Cromaldi and Ken Ito, they all said that DiStefano was open to devil worshiper, which is so
cool. It wouldn't surprise me. He was beyond that guy was totally nuts. I mean, by mob standards, like he's like at the level of the Westies and Roy DeMeo, and he might even be above those guys. He might be worse than those guys.
I'd say so.
Wow. That's something. That's saying something, yeah.
Well, the two names I'm writing down, Charlie Saragusa and Mad Sam DiStefano, because I'm starting to get the feeling that maybe it has nothing to do with JFK, but it might have to do with something. I don't know. That's the vibe I'm getting.
Interesting. Well, Steve, thank you very much. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today.
Yeah, no, cool. I'm glad. Thank you for having me.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Steve.
That's Enough Out of You podcast is executive produced and written by Bill Rader and Sean Kane and edited by Bill Rader. The That's Enough Out of You podcast and logo are exclusive property of Bags of Chicken, LLC. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or accounts of this podcast without the express written consent of Bags of Chicken, LLC is prohibited. So don't even try it.